Imagine watching your daughter grow from a bright, spirited little girl into a young woman full of dreams, plans, and possibilities. You're sharing laughter, late-night conversations, shopping trips, and all the moments that make up a lifetime. Then imagine not knowing that the last hug at your front door would be the final time you would see her alive. For Julieanne Lynch, that ordinary family interaction would remain etched in her memory for life. In this episode of SatNaving Life, Julieanne shares the story of Kelly, a much-loved daughter, sister, granddaughter, and friend. She takes us back through Kelly's childhood, the close bond they shared, the challenges Kelly faced as a young woman, and the hopes and plans she had for her future. My name is Carol McGirl. I'm a qualified nurse and health and safety trainer. I sit down with people who share valuable life experiences, giving us a glimpse of how they navigate challenging life events with courage and resilience. Together we explore topics around physical and mental health, resilience, first response and recovery, while looking at the lessons that can help us support ourselves and others when it matters most. In this episode, part 1 of a 2-part interview, Julieanne shares memories of Kelly's life, the special relationship they had as mother and daughter, and the devastating events that led to the day that her family received the news that no family should ever have to endure. This is a story about love, family, heartbreak, and the beginning of a journey that would leave Julieanne searching for answers.
She was excited and I was excited, the two of us maybe going off to college together. It was just such an experience and I thought it was really good for her. She was great with children. They just literally would run to her, wanting to hug her, hold her hand. It's just, what is it about me? And I says, just see your light, Kelly. But when you're crying and you've got that big urge, you're trying to hold the noise in, that sob, but she couldn't hold it in and it just came out. And then I cried with her. That moment of hugging her, feeling her soft hair, smelling her perfume, feeling her gentle lips against my cheek and her wee arms around me and hugging me and I love you, Mummy, see you soon. She'd always do that way, see you soon. It's like a wee lilty song thing. And I just would never, ever have expected that would be the last time I would see my child alive.
Already we're beginning to hear the remarkable strength, courage and insight that have emerged from Julieanne's journey. Through unimaginable heartbreak, she's chosen to use her voice to fight for justice for her daughter Kelly, to raise awareness and to advocate for change. Good morning, Julieanne. Thank you so much for being here today on this episode of SatNaving Life.
Thank you, Karen.
It's
been a long time in the making.
We're just going to start with maybe you talking a little bit about your life, your children.
I'm a mummy of 6 and I've been with John nearly 31 years. Kelly was the second eldest of 6. Had Christopher shortly before I turned 20 and then Kelly followed then when I was 23 and the rest, as I say, is history. Having Christopher and Kelly, those early days were, when I look back on, they were almost a fairy tale. Really, you have your little boy and you have your little girl and she was just such a sassy little thing. She was so funny, so serious as well. And she was very much a mommy's girl. I exclusively breastfed her for 14 months. Yet she just would not leave me alone. And I think that's the reason why we had such a close bond. I'm not saying that our relationship was perfect in any way, because if anybody has girls compared to boys, girls can really test you in ways nobody else can.
I concur.
But she was just such a delight, just like her sister Poppy. I have so many good memories of her, so many vivid memories, so many lived experiences with her. And all the children just have so many good things to say about her when obviously siblings argue. But as when little Finn came along, Finn was like a rainbow baby. He wasn't really planned, and I had him when I was 41 going on 42. So I was referred to as a geriatric
Oh, yeah.
mummy.
I've been there, yeah.
Yeah. When he came along, he was kind of like the icing on the cake. Kelly was so afraid of him at first. I think with her being an adult and being around something so small, because all her memories of all the other children, the 3 others who had been born after her, she was still very much a child. But now, as a blossoming young woman, she's seen this tiny little baby. And I think she just saw him as being so fragile, easily broken. And she was just so afraid of causing any harm. But I do have a picture the first time she held him, and he curled up into her arms, and she fell in love with him at that moment. And I always treasure that moment because she was so afraid those first 5 days, because she wouldn't hold him until day 5. And then when she did, like, it was every opportunity thereafter to hold him. It's really nice to be able to look back on the old prince and to see how the family has evolved and to see how much she was loved by everyone. And she really was the apple of my mummy and daddy's eye. Christopher and Kelly were both the first grandchildren for my parents because I am the eldest of 3. And like when Christopher was born, my parents were literally in 2 minutes after he had been delivered. And then when Kelly was born, they were immediately in the next day. And her birth was an absolute dream. Her whole delivery was just a beautiful experience. I know that some people don't look at birth as being a beautiful experience because I've had traumatic births, and
Yes.
but Kelly's really was a beautiful. It was just a very, very, very calm and serene, and even delivering her, it wasn't hard because Kelly was very graceful in the way she carried herself. Some people would say she was flamboyant and very vibrant, but there was also a natural poise to her. She was well-mannered and she carried herself well and carried her posture well, and she spoke very softly and very well. So it was only natural that she was going to come into the world with all of that already. So she was just a perfect baby, really. She really was. The only time it became tough was when she was teething. She was a dry teether, and her daddy would be away at sea. He was in the Navy, and I'd be on my own in the married quarters with the 2 children. And she would scream all night, and I did the whole thing, putting her down in the room on her own and letting her cry out. She wouldn't settle in beside me, and she didn't want to feed. So I made such a habit, and this habit continued until her adulthood. We'd go into the living room and I'd have her propped up on my waist, and I would just sing like the Blue Danube or Morning from Pierre Gaunt and Four Seasons and waltz around the living room. Yeah. And that carried on until her adulthood. Sometimes we would just randomly get up and start waltzing and humming our own songs. And that was the thing that used to calm her down and obviously distracted her from the fact that her teeth were cutting and the calpol hadn't held. But Mummy's weird dancing and weird humming seemed to do the trick. So those are some of the most beautiful memories I have. And Kelly probably was very like me in her personality, just very unique, very different. She was born in England and she was born in Portsmouth. So when we moved back in 2008, she would have been 8 years old. There were still certain things that she just couldn't get rid of, the way she pronounced some words. But when she got angry, she became real Northern Irish, as they say. Oh, yes. She had a wicked tongue in her head.
Okay.
But yeah.
What did she want to do in school? Or
She'd done really well in her GCSEs, and She had gone on to do her A levels. She was doing sociology, child development, and religion. And she was doing so well in religion. I was like, oh my God, Kelly, where has this come from? She says, Daddy just tells me everything. So I just know from all his praying. But then COVID hit and it was really difficult, the distance learning. When the whole logging on to computers and everybody's on a screen, it just did not work for her and she hated it. And then the whole social aspect of it, she was still 19 when we all went into lockdown, and it was hell for her, just not being able to socialize, not being able to go into tech and see her friends, not being able just to go to the shops like a normal person.
Yeah.
It just felt like all the simple things that she enjoyed doing were now restricted. So she was restricted. It affected her mental health. It affected her sense of self. And it did affect our relationship, but it was really a very difficult time. And I'm sure it was very difficult in many households with youngsters. I know from myself, my son was in the middle of doing his GCSEs, revising for GCSE maths in distance learning. So it was a really difficult time. But Kelly was just an amazing young woman. And I always enjoyed her company because when she was about 16 and 17, when we lived back down in Fermanagh, we'd have mummy and daughter date nights. We'd get dolled up. We'd go out and we'd have our steak dinner, such great crack. And then we'd probably go out dancing and Daddy'd be picking us up. And I have so many memories of us doing that. And I'm so glad that we did those things because I think it's so important. I was always her mother. I was her mother first and foremost. I was the person who had to discipline and had to step in, who had to cross the lines when I felt like she was pushing past boundaries. But I was also a friend. And I know that some people have this idea when you're a parent, you can't be their friend. Actually, you can be a friend.
I believe so, yeah.
You can be a friend, especially as your child becomes an adult. I think it's so important to see them as much more than just your child. You have to see them as the human, as the person that they are flourishing. They're literally on the brink of being completely independent of you. So you have to have a friendship. You have to have that kind of relationship because the dynamics of mother and child changes from being a baby right up into adulthood, and it goes through many different changes because the needs of that child change continuously. And I'm 48 years of age, and I know that my mommy is my friend, but she is mommy first and foremost.
Yes.
And my needs have evolved from the time I was born. I still need my mother now.
Sure.
And so it doesn't make a difference. But she is my friend. And my eldest, we have such an amazing relationship now. And it's so lovely to be able to sit down and just have normal conversations and know that all the tough work, all the hard times, all the tantrums is to get you through to this point because this is what it's all about.
And was Kelly in a relationship at that time, or?
Kelly was in a relationship the middle of actually 2020. And it was a nice relationship, but with all the social distancing and having all these bubbles and that, it didn't really work out and it ended. But we're still friends with that young man. In 2021, she started going out with somebody from back in Fermanagh, and I wasn't very happy about the relationship because I had known about the kind of gaslighting he did with her, and I just felt like it wasn't healthy and he was a bad influence on her. And that's when my eyes kind of started opening up to certain behaviors in Kelly. I started noticing certain marks on her body and noticing that when she would come home, she'd be quite withdrawn. She wasn't the bubbly Kelly that she was prior to this relationship. I just find herself really closing off. Kelly could easily go for days without eating and substitute that then with alcohol, especially when she was in the relationship with this particular young man. And I hated it. I hated knowing that when she was down there, and it would be for days and days at a time, I knew when Kelly would contact me, she'd be crying, she wouldn't be making sense, and I knew that she would have self-harmed. But she was so far away from me, and she didn't want me or Sean going down to pick her up and sort her out and things like that. And it just ended up that that particular boyfriend was just keeping her topped up, drunk all the time, because she was easy to control when she was in a drunken stupor. It came to a head in April 2022 when she rang me early one morning and she was crying and she was begging me to help her. Obviously, I'm in Armagh, she's in Enniskillen, and I tried to get through to all the people I could, but nobody was picking up that early in the morning. And she went in video call with me, and that's when I seen the marks on her face and I seen the blood and all that. So I had to ring the PSNI, explain to them where I was, explain the situation, and long story short, the PSNI had to rescue her from that property in Enniskillen. She had to play dead for him to stop hitting her. And she literally played dead, and that's the only way for her. She waited for him to sleep, and then she snuck off to the bathroom to ring me. But we got the PSNI there, they got her out, and it was all on body cam footage, and her injuries, the state of his abuse. This is my child. And with us being in a different jurisdiction, it was a wee bit difficult, but we did press charges, and I went to court in January 2023. And Kelly didn't have to testify because there was enough video footage, and she had a statement they were willing to read out because she was afraid of having to see him again. He pled guilty to some of the charges and not guilty to the other charges, and he got off with a fine and a suspended sentence and community service. My daughter had a broken eye socket. Her body was covered in bruises, and he got a slap on the wrist, and there's no accountability for what happened. So when Kelly had those injuries, I photographed everything. I wanted it for our own records, for our own solicitor. And I never ever thought that I'd ever have to use those pictures as a reference to what I was saying in 2024. Kelly came home after that, and she was in a really great place. She went to the doctors. We were getting her back into good eating habits. She was engaging more with the family. All these bruises that she would always come home with weren't happening anymore. She was taking better care of herself, taking pride in herself again, laughing again, and just coming out in the car for our random spins around town, cheeky McDonald's trips, which is, some people might think it is so stupid, but we would always deny we'd ever been to McDonald's. We'd dump the rubbish before we'd get home, and I'd be like, just don't tell them we had it. As soon as we got in the house, oh, we just had a McDonald's. Mommy told me not to say anything.
Oh.
But yeah, it was just great crack, and I just love seeing her back to being herself and just being my Kelly. And then September came around and she started chatting with another lad, and she wasn't saying too much to me. So this is like September 2022, and I was glad that she was getting back to socializing because she had gone to Belfast with her best friend Eric. She was away shopping, like she was doing the things that she couldn't do when she was in a relationship. And I was really worried at one stage because the lad who had been arrested, and he kind of wouldn't leave her alone. And I was just like, you need to just block and delete and just move on. I think that he was manipulating her into thinking that she needed him. But with enough of us telling her, you don't need him because look at how far you've come. Look at the way you were coming home, bruised beyond to the point where you had to wear long sleeves. You have bags under your eyes. That's not normal. When you're in a relationship and it's healthy, you bloom, you flourish, you kind of have a shine about you. But in a relationship like that, no. In the September, she started texting a young man, and she was a wee bit excited, kind of like the whole love bombing thing, all the compliments, and she was getting so excited again and choosing outfits, which she hadn't done for a long time. And it was good to see that. But I was always very nervous because Kelly would always take people at face value. She would always see beyond what a rumor may have gone around about people, maybe that they weren't the best people. And Kelly would be, I raised her not to be judgy. I raised her to always give somebody the benefit of the doubt, but don't have the blinkers down. And who are we to make judgment on anyone? Of course, people can be good and absolutely surprise you. But I was just a wee bit worried in the beginning. I just thought after what she'd been through earlier in the year, would she be jumping headfirst into something and not just being emotionally ready? Because she had a lot of PTSD after what had happened to her. She had trust issues. She had issues around her own image. Was she ugly? Was she fat? Was she flat-chested? All these things that would have been said to her that really knocked her self-esteem off course. And we had been building her back up. I just didn't want something to come along and take all that work away. And it's not that we were doing the hard work, because Kelly was doing the hard work. We were just giving her the tools to be able to do the work. And I just had to allow her to do what she was doing. She had just turned 22 years of age. She was an adult by all sense of the word. So I had to allow her just to make the choice. So she started seeing this lad from Monaghan. I think it was in around the November time of 2022. And she was really open to me about who he was. She says he's a really good job. He's so nice looking. He goes to the gym. He wears nice clothes. And then she said he's from a settled traveling family. And I says, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I know lots of settled travelers. Some of them have been really great friends of mine. So they started seeing each other, and she'd go up for a day here, a day there. And then by Christmas time, they were going steady. And we get into the new year and they're still going steady. There were a few little red flags that I've only found out about now in the recent months, but there were red flags with her friends.
Okay.
And it was just some of the nastiness that he would say to her so early on in the relationship. They didn't feel that it was their role to tell me, that Kelly should have told me herself. But obviously, after what she went through previously in 2022, I don't think she wanted me to know that she had jumped headfirst into another controlling relationship.
What were your feelings on this guy?
I had never met him.
Okay.
I don't make it my mission to go out and meet every person they're going out with, because an awful lot of the time it could be just like a quick fling. And if it was serious enough, she'd invite him back to the house, which she had done before, which my boys do with their girlfriends. After it's serious enough, they come home to meet us. I had spoken to him a few times on the phone. He seemed okay, but she was doing that weird thing where she'd come home after being with him and retreat into her room and being on her own. And I know that Kelly loved her own company as well. She loved to just slob out and watch Rick and Morty or The American Shameless. She loved it and just binge eating her noodles and Doritos or whatever and just enjoying that, because she's very like me. I love my own time to watch my own programs, but she was just being very isolated. She wasn't enjoying the things. And then she'd go back down to him. And then I just started a shift in her personality. She was coming home kind of groggy. And I would say to her, have you been drinking? And she'd always say, oh yeah, just a few drinks and that. And then we got to Easter, and then we got to the early months of summer. And this was becoming a continuous thing. He had lost his license in the early January, so we couldn't drive up north, but we could still drive down in Ireland. So we would have to drive Kelly to Monaghan and pick her up from Monaghan, or he'd meet us on the border kind of thing. And with me having a young child at the time, it was Daddy who would do most of all of that.
Yes.
Because if it was me doing the child, would have to come with me, and Kelly didn't want Finn in the car if he was going to be crying or whatever. So that was happening on a regular basis, and she'd come home, and I was just really noticing the self-harm had become a very regular thing. I had learned not to react. We had a self-harm safety kit in the house, and I would always tend to Kelly's wounds after she had come down, because there's no point talking to somebody when they're in a heightened state. You need to wait for them to come down. And all her injuries would have been very superficial, never needing any stitches or hospital admissions or anything like that. So I would always tend to the wounds, clean them, and if they needed a wee bit of gauze, I'd put the gauze around. And it was during that period I'd ask her how she was feeling, what caused this, what pushed you to do this. And she always explained to me, because she felt like she had no control, and this is the only way of controlling something in her life, because she couldn't control anything else. Self-harm just isn't about cutting yourself. Self-harm comes in many forms: alcoholism, gambling, overspending, overcleaning, excessively running, doing exercise. Like, all that is self-harm. Everybody just thinks of self-harm as somebody as cutting or mutilating the body. People have to realize it is a lot bigger than that. I would just encourage her to try to regulate, because Kelly had an awful problem with regulating her emotions. And I often at times had wondered, was she on the spectrum? Because I had found with Kelly, she tended to mask an awful lot of herself in her teens. I had seen it. And then obviously having two autistic children, I could see the traits, but the school couldn't see it. And the doctors couldn't see it. But definitely as she stepped into womanhood, that lack of emotional regulation really made me question, was there some undiagnosed autism there, or some neurodivergence of some kind? But she didn't want to know. Things had really come to a head when she stopped posting on social media, and she showed me the text, and she'd say, oh, look, his family has told him that I was posting this or I was posting that, and he's gone mad at me. Look what he's saying to me. And I thought that was such an invasion of her right to show who she was. Yes, it mightn't be to everybody's taste, but isn't that the power of social media? You can do and say what you want. And at the end of the day, if you're posting a meme that isn't to somebody's taste, scroll past.
Of course.
She really became quite withdrawn. And then she admitted to me she was taking Lyrica. And I didn't know what Lyrica was at the time. And I Googled it, and it's called pregabalin.
Yes.
And I had learned about the deaths of some teenagers up in Belfast who had been at uni, went out on the night and had taken pregabalin. So I was like, oh my God, because we can't get that up in prescription. I do know that Lyrica can be given from your GPs in Ireland.
Yes.
So I was like, oh my God, where is she getting this from? And it would start off with 1 or 2 tablets, and it ended up to the point that through her friends, I found out that she could go through a sheet of them in a day. She was coming home so groggy, and I knew in her eyes the way she would walk. It was really concerning, and I was just so unhappy. But they had broke up briefly in the June, and he had told her to go kill herself, that she was a tramp, that she was a slut, and all this stuff. But unfortunately, they got back together in the Septembers, and the relationship continued. But by Christmas time, Kelly, I think, had enough. She definitely had enough. That Christmas, we would never have known that it was going to be our last Christmas with Kelly. Christmas 2023, and it was the best Christmas we'd ever had. It was just so calm, so chill, so enjoyable. I know that everybody thinks about Christmas Day, oh, would love it if there's snow, but it was such a lovely day, and the child had got this electric ride-on police scooter, so we were all out the front recording him riding around this, and It was just so nice. We were all out in our pajamas and woolly jumpers watching Finn playing, and it was just an absolute lovely Christmas.
Daddy was in a good place.
She was in an amazing place because I was working with her around the clock. She was seeing mental health team. We were both making plans that I was going to go to college end of September. I was going to go on to do counselling. And we were both going to go to Banbridge, and she is going to go on then to finally go back to do child development. She wanted to work in a nursery setting. So we had been looking out for apprenticeships, and she'd been to a few interviews. So we officially applied for those in the January of 2024 for enrollment for September 2024. And she was excited, and I was excited, the two of us maybe going off to college together. It was just such an experience, and I thought it was really good for her. Yes, she was 23, but the fact that she was making this move on her own terms, this initiative, and she knew where she wanted to go. She was great with children. She had this loving, nurturing mannerism with children. She could never understand why children gravitated to her, but she'd walk into the room and there she was. They just literally would run to her, wanting to hug her, hold her hand. And she says, "What is it about me?" And I says, "Just see your light, Kelly." She says, "Oh, they should be seeing the witch in me." And I'm like, "No, Kelly, that's just your persona."
Was there a struggle with her coming off the Lyrica?
It wasn't, because she was only taking it when she was down with him. She was on no medication when she was at home because I wouldn't allow it, and the alcohol would be controlled. I wouldn't say, "No, you're not allowed a glass of wine," but you're going to eat if you want to chill with a few drinks. She's an adult, but they had to be on terms. But no, there was no medication. And the doctor had asked her, did she want to go on antidepressants? And she said no. The only medication that Kelly was on prior to her death was the pill,
Yeah.
not to get pregnant. That literally was her own medications. And when she was at home, there was no going out and buying drugs. So when she was at home, she was at home. Kelly couldn't drive. She didn't have a massive group of friends. Her best friends were in Fermanagh. She'd be up seeing them, but they both have children. So Kelly wasn't hanging around a circle of people that were out doing drugs. That was a narrative, that she was drinking all the time and taking drugs. No, she definitely wasn't. January came and she was in a really good place. And February came, a good place, still seeing the guy, but it was starting to dwindle out. She was giving him a few last chances. They just didn't seem to do anything together. And I'd read somewhere that they had planned to go to emigrate to Australia. And when I say that, I laughed hard because Kelly didn't even have a passport.
Yeah.
I knew that wasn't going to happen. She had a passport card, but that was it. And Kelly promised she would never get on another plane again after her experience flying home from Spain with a wee bit of turbulence. She hated it. She was going to college in the September. And the month before she died, she was out in the car with me quite a lot. Once we got Finn off the nursery, the two of us would sneak off into Banbridge or into Portadown. She loved the rain. She loved going shopping for candles. The two of us were candle mad, and we'd go around just sniffing everything and then getting masks, skincare, or trying on clothes or hats or whatever. We call sweets foosies. Get some snacks and foosies, and then our cheeky McDonald's or Starbucks or Costa, and just really loving each other's company. And she was really shining again because she had made a decision, and she had made the decision on her own that she was going to be ending the relationship, but it just had to find the right time to end the relationship. And she was making plans for her future. And I think they'd seen each other a few times before that. And I do think at some stage at the end of February 2024 that they'd gone to Airtastic in Craigavon, and it had a good evening. Like, she was buzzing. That was one of the last pictures I took of her that day. It was the one that I did her death announcement with. Her daddy had put her eyelashes on, but I had done her makeup. She was hopeless at makeup. But Daddy could get these false eyelashes on perfectly, and she liked the way I'd done her concealer and her contour and highlighter and her lips. So she was really happy, and she did have a good night that night. When she came home, I think she went down to Monaghan and stayed a while, and then she came home, and it just wasn't enough to keep her mentally in the relationship. I think she realized that it just wasn't good for her. And unfortunately, March came around, and that morning we got a call, or Kelly got the call from her boyfriend to say that his brother hadn't come home from the night before. And Kelly was really fond of her boyfriend's brother. She felt that he was misunderstood, that he'd been let down by so many people, like mental health services, addiction services, and probably even the authorities hadn't helped enough with him. She was worried for his well-being, but then when she got the call to confirm that his body had been found, she was absolutely devastated. I remember sitting in our dining room, and she was in her nightgown and she was just crying, but she was trying to cry quietly. But you know, when you're crying and you've got that big urge, you're trying to hold the noise in, that sob, but she couldn't hold it in and it just came out. And then I cried with her because, like, who wants to hear about the death of a young person? There's just so much tragedy in the world. I put myself in that family's position, like 23 years of age, and I was like, oh my God, how are they going to get through this? She made the decision to go down after he asked her, please come down. Mommy wants you down. We need you. Kelly was very scared about being around death. She didn't deal with death and crowds very well. And to be honest, she wouldn't have been to an awful lot of wakes in her life. Like, we'd shield them from all of that, really. But as Irish wakes go, you know yourself that it tends to be a massive community event. She stayed home for her sister's birthday tea and cake, and she came to the living room door, and I got up and then I walked to the front door with her. I just would never have imagined that would be it. That moment of hugging her, feeling her soft hair, smelling her perfume, feeling her gentle lips against my cheek and her wee arms around me and hugging me and, I love you, Mummy, see you soon. She'd always do that way, see you soon. It's like a wee lilty song thing. And I just would never, ever have expected that would be the last time I would see my child alive.
Kelly's story is heartbreaking, but it is also a story about love. Julieanne gives us a glimpse of the unique connection that Kelly had with her family. She helps us envisage the little girl who loved to dance around the living room, the young woman who adored her family, and the daughter whose future seemed to be opening up in front of her. Julieanne has talked about the struggles that Kelly experienced entering womanhood. We've also heard how difficult it can be to recognise the signs of coercive control, emotional abuse, and unhealthy relationships. Often these situations develop gradually, making it hard for both the person involved and those around them to see just how serious things have become. One of the strongest messages from Julieanne's story is the importance of staying connected. Listening without judgment, checking in on people, and letting them know that they are loved and supported, even when they are struggling to see their own worth. If someone in your life seems withdrawn, isolated, frightened, or unlike themselves, trust your instincts and start a conversation. Sometimes simply being there can make a huge difference. So please remember, if you are struggling, know that there is support available. You do not have to face it alone. But for Julieanne, this is not where the story ends. The grief of losing her daughter became intertwined with questions that to date remain unanswered. In part 2 of this episode of SatNaving Life, Julieanne takes us deeper into that journey. With vulnerability and unimaginable strength, she talks about the moment that she had to face the reality of her daughter's passing. She shares the challenges of navigating a complex investigation, her fight for answers, the lack of support, the impact on her family, and the determination that has driven her to keep speaking out in Kelly's name. For now, we leave you with the memories of Kelly Lynch, a much-loved daughter, sister, granddaughter, and friend. And we leave you with a mother's words: hug your children, tell them that you love them, and never take an ordinary goodbye for granted. Thank you so much for joining us for part 1 of this conversation, and we hope you'll join us again for part 2, which will be released on the 26th of June. Take care, be safe.